Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now we're in the second half of October, it's time to be planting garlic. And the reason why you plant garlic in autumn is because it needs about a month of temperatures below 10 degrees in order to produce the heads. You take a head of garlic, break it open, and discard the smaller cloves. Keep those for cooking, because you want nice juicy cloves like that one to form a really big head. A small clove simply won't make a big head of garlic. And then prepare the ground well, plenty of manure, but good drainage, and also in sunshine. I simply make a hole with my finger, pop the clove in, pointy end up, so that it's well below the surface, up to an inch below the surface of the soil, and then using my hand span, which is about 9 inches, make another hole. And plant them like this in rows. And the important thing about garlic is that they get the cold in winter, plenty of moisture in spring, and then baking hot in summer. So make sure the site is not shaded at all. Now, in today's programme, Sarah is also planting bulbs, but this time it's lilies. And Joe is helping me establish a new conifer garden here at Berryfields. Now, this is a corner of Berryfields I don't think we've really shown you before, and it is one of those spaces that is tucked in between other things, because here we have the formal pond covered to keep the leaves off it for winter, and there, of course, our shrubbery that we've been making all this year. And over on this side, there's a little bed that I planted up with annuals when we did our annual programme in the spring. And this area has just been biding its time. Well, it's now going to be our new little conifer garden, where we will be trying to grow conifers in an interesting way, and that's going against trends a little. But before we can start planting, we certainly need to prepare the soil. And I've got here some composted bracken. Now, like all good compost, it feels nice, it smells sweet, and it's good stuff. It makes you want to put it on the ground. And the reason why I'm using bracken is that it will lower the pH. A lot of conifers do much better if they've got a slightly ericaceous soil. If you can't get any composted bracken from your garden centre, you might be able to find some composted pine bark, which also will be good for ericaceous plants. And if your soil is limey, then you really do need to try and lower the pH if you can. I've also got some grit, which we have put some in the soil already, but I'm going to keep these bags for individual planting, because conifers tend to like good drainage as well as a slightly acidic soil. And the one thing I would say is, if you're preparing a new piece of garden, put all it takes into getting the soil right. Don't be in a hurry. Get the soil right, and then everything will grow really well. Now, I said that conifers are not particularly trendy. They've been out of fashion for years now. But Joe went out and discovered that maybe things are changing.
Now, if we're to believe the rumours, the word on the street is that conifers are making a comeback. Oh, let's face it, they're so dated. We left them behind in the 70s, didn't we? Ah, those were the days when every front garden had at least one conifer. But back in the 21st century, you can't really call them trendy, can you? I mean, as a designer, I might use, well, some Pinus mugo, some Taxus baccata, or an upright juniper, and I'll use them sparingly. But they're not really my shrub of choice. It was back in the 1980s that the conifer fell seriously out of fashion. Over the next 20 years, it was a big conifer that gave the group a bad name. Leylandii.
A man has been charged with the murder of his neighbour.
Now that scourge of suburbia, the cause of endless rows between neighbours.
Some people say to me, the only thing to do with them is to chop them down. But there are some people out there that believe conifers have a lot to offer.
They're wonderful, and conifers, have many uses. They're architectural, they're structural, they're good for weed suppression. There are 101 uses. The right plant, the right place, you can't go wrong with them.
So why have they had such a bad press?
The media are very good at telling a great story and ignoring the facts. And they've incorrectly used the word conifer when they should have said Leylandii. And just because there have been one or two problems in one or two small confined areas of one variety of tree, they blame a whole genera of plants. And it's just simply not true. It's not relevant. It's hysterical.
So what does the future hold for conifers?
Well, generally, we've always found that conifers have never been as unpopular as people say they are. And trends in conifer sales have been slowly upwards for several years now. And I think that that trend will continue. I really do. I think they've been long neglected.
Conifers are beginning to suspiciously rear their heads in the design arena. This year at Chelsea, there were two distinctly different looks emerging. A strict formal look where Italian cypresses were used to reinforce the geometry, and a much more naturalistic style which incorporates a wider range of conifers. Well, I'm yet to be convinced, but I'm visiting Owen's Brothers Conifer Nursery in Beverley near Worcester, and I'm going with an open mind.
Hello.
I've been given the daunting task of finding 3 conifers that I particularly like to take back to Berryfields for our new conifer garden. This is a silly one.
That's right. It's an Abies pinsapo. This is the Spanish fir. This one does get quite big.
This reminds me of one of those guys, you know, who makes the poodles out of the balloons.
That's right, yeah.
At the kids' parties. You know, there you go for the birthday girl. Well, that's a great blue, isn't it? A fantastic colour.
Little dwarf one.
It is a bit dinky.
He does no more than about sort of 2 inches a year.
OK, so this is quite old already, Paul.
That's right, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I quite like her. Yeah. We've got to think about the scale of the whole planting, the area of planting, but...
That's right.
Well, I'll take that. These are great, aren't they? Are these conifers?
It's a New Zealand conifer. All the new growth you get on this will be this beautiful reddish mahogany colour.
It's fabulous, isn't it? This time of year, that's gorgeous.
It only grows quite low. It's about sort of 2 foot, 2'6" high. And don't be afraid to trim it back.
Yeah.
'Cause that's where you're going to get all your new colour.
Yeah, great. Oh, well, listen, I'm going to take one of those, but I might have to come back for some more. They're nice.
Okay.
I like those. I really like those. What is it? It just makes me laugh. It just shows like a sort of small woman with very long hair. It's amazing.
Which will go bright gold in another couple of weeks, as soon as you get the frost, and it'll be totally bare in the winter.
Makes me feel very follically challenged, actually. Well, you're not coming to Berryfields, love. Sorry. Do like you, though. Wow, that is quite stunning, isn't it? I mean, especially this time of year, it really sings out. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing. But it's more open than most cryptomeria, isn't it? It's got a very open habit. It's quite airy.
Fairly slow in the early stages, and then they'll start to put on about a foot a year.
Oh, what about these, though? These junipers, these sort of prostrate junipers. They're like they're sort of erupting out of the ground. I think they're fantastic, and the contrast in shape to all the others around them. You know, they're really very dynamic. You know, this is designer speak now.
Yeah. And the lovely thing about it, you get these lovely juniper berries on the undersides.
Yeah, well, now it's decision time. I've got to work out which. I can only take 3 back to Berryfields.
Right.
And I really like you. But in your own way, you're rather beautiful. But you two, I don't know, I just can't decide between you two either. But I think you're going to have to go. And, well, I'm going to cheat a little bit. But I'm going to have a few of these and call it one, and we can drift, clump and drift them underneath.
So we've whetted your appetite on conifers then, have we?
Certainly have.
Changed your views.
No, you have. I can't wait to get back and start planting those.
Okay.
Look at this one, Monty. This juniper. I tell you what, I'm quite turned on to these. I think it's an amazing plant, you know.
So you've been brought around to conifers?
Well, some of them, you know, not all of them, but I think it's the way you use them. And, you know, you could use them in a Mediterranean-style garden or like a Californian-style garden with lots of gravel in between if you've got that sort of aspect.
I wasn't certain about them. You know, I haven't always been a conifer convert, but you can give me a hand. I'm glad you're here. I want to use your muscles.
OK.
You're young. OK, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Go on then.
Up. Oh, it is a bit on the heavy side, I'm afraid.
It's very heavy.
Have you been to Biddulph Grange?
Never.
Have you been to Highgrove?
Not yet.
Right, well, both of them use stumps, really interesting. They've got stumperies. Highgrove, they plant them with hostas, and they look fantastic. Now, both those places use this sort of tortured, bleached-out wood to great effect. And I think if we get some stumps and some other driftwood, that will be the hard landscaping. We can get this rather dark, Gothic atmosphere that will bring out the best in conifers.
No, I think it sounds brilliant. I mean, this is like an elephant's skull already placed, and the scale of it is good too. But we've got this great backdrop with this yew. We're going to add plants. It's going to, you know, develop over time.
Now, I've got these few bits of driftwood, which, in fact, we got these from a website. Garden centres sell them. you know, you can obviously, you can find them if you're lucky enough.
Yeah.
Find your own bits of driftwood.
I suppose a tree surgeon as well, you know, might have bits of wood or old bits of stump.
Contact the Forestry Commission. Yeah. I think this one looks like a sort of mad psychedelic church spire. Sort of something that might come out of Mervyn Peak or something like that. Where they're weathered, where they're worn, that's when they get interesting.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, you won't find these in your average wood.
No, you certainly won't. What are they? I've never seen these before.
They're wood, but they come from Thailand, and they're great big tree trunks that have been underwater, and the current washes down them, which is why they're conical, and then all the holes are made by mussels that eat into them. And they rot really quickly underwater, apparently. But if they're lifted out, they'll last very, very much longer.
I think they're fabulous. I mean, all three of those, slightly varying heights.
Well, you see, and you also, we could either plant, you know, your juniper, I thought, might look nice planted in amongst them. And then if we have spires of conifers, already we're getting this Gothic idea.
Right, yeah. I think they're fantastic. I mean, they're so sculptural. You can do a lot with these.
They're not too heavy either.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm going to leave you to it, OK?
I'll see you soon. For details of where to buy all types of driftwood and conifers, check our website at bbc.co.uk/gardening.
I'm planting lilies in the crimson end of the long borders here. We've got plenty of lilies in the formal garden, but as yet we haven't got them elsewhere, so it's about time we put some in. I'm putting in two varieties, Pink Perfection, which is a beautiful crimson one which will go incredibly well with the colour combinations here, and a white called Lilium candidum, or the Madonna lily, which has a bit of a reputation for being a bit tricky, but I'm going to give it a go anyway because it's got fantastic scent. They're expensive lily bulbs. This one's $2.49 for 2 bulbs, and so you want to plant them carefully. And you need to dig a hole about 8 inches deep, and then put a good inch or 2 of grit in the bottom of the hole, particularly if you garden on heavy soil like we do, because like most bulbs, lilies don't like to sit with their bulbs wet, and so the grit will really help with the drainage of our soil. And then they look almost like an octopus, the roots hanging out the bottom of the bulb, and you want to make sure that those are spread out properly over the grit. And then you can backfill with a mix of loam, and I've got leaf mould here, which we made over the last year, and loam, because they like a rich soil too, because they're woodland plants on the whole, and leaf mould is, of course, what you'd get in a wood.
Now I've got the driftwood into place, I can think about planting the conifers. But before I do that, there's one other smaller job I want to do to use up the last of the bracken compost. Now, while Sarah is planting some of the better-known lilies, I want to add a couple of species lilies to our spring garden. And if you don't know them, they're certainly worth pursuing. Now, the first is Lilium duchartrii. Now, I don't need the bracken compost for this because, unlike most lilies, this actually will tolerate some lime, and leaf mould will be fine for it. Now, you can see it's also quite a small bulb. We've got a nice root system on this. We bought this mail order, by the way, which is the best way of buying some of these more unusual species lilies. And what makes it remarkable is that it spreads stoloniferously, which means that it puts a stolon out from the base here, at least 12 inches and sometimes quite a lot longer, which will then turn at right angles and throw up a flower spike. So in a few years you can have the whole colony under the beech here of really beautiful flowering lilies, and they've got this pinky purpley splodges on a white background, which is modest but yet really quite exotic at the same time. Now I'm just going to put that down and add some leaf mould because it comes from a mountainous region of western China, and it does best with really good drainage and a high organic mix. And leaf mould and a bit of grit are what you need. In fact, it's a good idea to lift the bulbs every 2 or 3 years and add more leaf mould to keep that level high. And if you can't work your hands through it, the drainage is not going to be good enough. Now, we'll leave those there and move over here. The other bulb I want to put in here is Lilium nepalense. And you'll often read in books about lilies that this is pretty much tender. It doesn't like a temperature below 0. But we're going to give it a go here at Berryfields and hope that it will take the worst of our winter weather. And unlike Dutratii, it does prefer a slightly acidic soil. So this is where our leftover bracken comes, and I'm going to add really quite a lot of that and work it in. It's also stoloniferous, and again the stolons will come out and the flowers will come up. And the flowers are extraordinary. They've got a sort of greeny tinge to these large petals that fold back, and inside a deep wine-coloured, almost chocolatey stain. Now, the final bit of interest about Lilium nepalense, for me at least, is that it was introduced to the West by a certain David Donne. And he was one of my forebears, beginning of the 19th century. He was a plant hunter. He also collected some conifers, actually. We can get back to those later. But before I do, I must plant up the rest of these lilies.
As well as planting bulbs, now is an ideal time to divide your perennials. Carol started dividing in the long border a couple of weeks ago and divided the monadas and the geums, but I'm going to divide this crocosmia because it's a classic plant that when it gets too congested it stops flowering nearly so well. I really love crocosmias, as does a remarkable young gardener whose passion for these plants has saved his father's nursery.
Yeah, oh, there's a new one. Placer. From a very young age, actually, when I used to help my dad out at the flower shows from the age of 8 and 9. And I started to actually work on the nursery in 2000 from an age of 13 to help out doing the odd jobs, cleaning stuff up for shows, chopping down trees, cleaning beds.
Back in August 2000, we had this massive storm of over 2 inches of rain and hail in 1 hour that devastated a lot of the nursery. In 2001, I was struck down with a fairly mystery illness, diagnosed as an overactive thyroid. But of course, as these problems hit me personally, foot and mouth hit this area. So it was a triple whammy. This is where this chap came into the driving seat and took over.
The nursery seemed to deteriorate, areas were getting tatty, so I took it upon myself to start getting areas cleaned up. So we pleased customers.
Oh, they love sun. It's scarlaty, super flower there.
I went to a plant sale and I saw these crocosmias on sale and I realised how beautiful they were and decided to buy one. So the friend of my father gave it to me for free, and then the rest of that plant sale I was going around and collecting even more of them. Crocosmias are a very well-known garden plant. They originate from South Africa and you can see them a lot around Britain in British gardens. They're very easy to grow. The Latin name crocos means saffron because that's the smell that you get from the leaves once they're dried out. Crocosmias tend to flower, they start off early July. You have the first flowering ones, Lucifer, and the common orange one, which people refer to as the Montbretia in the garden, the plain orange, rampant one, which people are always digging up. But they flower all through July, into August, into September, and there's the odd one which flowers in October. In my collection I have 140 different types of crocosmias. However, there are a few which are my certain favourites. One is Crocosmia vulcan, which is a lovely, short, deep red one. Flowers end of July into August, but it's a lovely reliable one. Pretty slow, but it's a good doer. One of the first crocosmias that I came across was Crocosmia Rowan yellow. It's an amazing crocosmia with bright golden yellow flowers which hold themselves in one long plume. It is a slow grower, however it is very reliable for flower year upon year. Crocosmia Tangerine Queen is another super one for the garden. It's a bright orange one which flowers at the end of July into August. It has lovely sword-shaped pleated leaves, quite vigorous, so it's very easy to grow. Crocosmia Pottsii Calais Pink is an amazing crocosmia. Because it's of the Pottsii origin, it means it has tubular flowers, however Calais Pink's pink flowers. It's a lovely rose pink colour, it stands up about 3 feet tall, but it's very easy to grow in any garden. Originally there's about 800, 900 different types before the Second World War, but then due to the Dig for Victory campaign where all the gardens were turned into vegetable plots, some of the older hybrids of crocosmias were lost to cultivation and they're trying to be searched out again now because there's only about 250, 300 available to the public. There's new crocosmias coming out all the time, and this is a seedling we've found on the nursery off Citronella, which is a stunning colour. We're thinking of calling it Bowl and Blaze, but I haven't made the final decision, so watch this space. It is unusual for someone of my age to be interested in plants. It seems to be in some ways a dying trade. but I don't see what's wrong with having an interest, because it's very enjoyable and I love working outdoor with nature.
Well, you can only be proud of him because he's been a fantastic son to me, and he's just underpinned the business basically and kept us going, and now we're building on his hard work, and in time obviously we'll get the place up to scratch where it used to be.
I had no idea that crocosmias came in so many different colours, and I really love those yellows. But this is one of my old favourites, which is Crocosmia lucifer, and it's in a lovely scarlet orange. Crocosmias couldn't be easier to divide because they're really bulbous, and what you want to do is just divide the clump up with a spade initially because it's quite congested, and then you can just rip it apart. What you want to do is replant the bulbs individually about 3 to 4 inches apart at the normal level that they were in the soil when you dug up the whole clump. And I've already put quite a few in there, and so these ones I'm actually going to use for our homegrown Berryfields garden, where we're raising everything from seed cuttings and division. And so I'm going to put 5 into a 2-litre pot and put them in the cold frame over the winter for planting out next spring. And there are 2 schools of thought when you're dividing a bulbous perennial like a crocosmia. Some people would say that because it's a perennial you want to cut the leaves off because that will allow the roots to settle in better. But I think because it's a bulb it's actually better to leave the leaves on so that they can photosynthesize and really are much more likely to flower next year.
But I suppose it's how straggly they look at the same time. I mean, if
Yeah.
the leaves are literally falling off them
They are a bit.
and have gone yellow, then I'd cut them off.
Yeah. I think most of these are worth leaving for a bit.
There are some other really nice late flowering crocosmias like Spitfire and Golden Fleece that are looking fantastic now. Of course, you wouldn't divide them at the moment, not when they're in full flower. But that is a dilemma. I mean, these long borders are looking wonderful. You know, there's so much colour still here. And gardeners are in 2 minds when to divide, you know.
It does seem a shame, doesn't it? And in fact, there are some things, like the grasses, Stipa gigantea in particular, I know is much better left until the spring because it really resents being divided this side of the winter.
Yeah, I mean, those grasses sitting in the wet through the
Yeah.
winter, they don't like it. But also plants like the helenium that's looking fantastic now, I'd leave that until it's completely finished and then think about dividing it if it needs it.
Yeah.
But one plant I can do right now is this Brunnera. This is the perfect time of year to divide them, really. OK, it's got some good foliage on it, but give it a week or 2 and it'll be over. I'm going to cut this foliage off, and that's going to help stimulate root growth. So I'm literally going to cut this all back. And then I'm going to just get my hands in there. There you go. You could use a knife or a spade. And now I've got 2 plants, and I can subdivide that one again, split it again, and then dot it around the garden. It's a really good little filler plant. And this one's going to go back in the same spot. It's one of the easiest jobs in the garden to do. And this is the right time of year to divide some other plants as well. Tradescantias, such as this Concord grape, tend to get messy and collapse on themselves, so regularly divide to keep them small and keep them looking tidy. This Artemisia ludoviciana is a clump-forming perennial which will spread dramatically in a single season. Divide now, and don't worry, if you break off any young roots, they can be potted up to make new plants.
I planted Joe's juniper in amongst those cones, and with all their sort of mollusc-eaten shapes, and you've got the softness of the juniper, you've got lots of textures and lots of shapes working there. And I'm going to put this cryptomeria in next to the bleached wood of this. Now I'll just put a little bit of grit in the bottom to improve the drainage. And the cryptomeria, which is surprisingly prickly, will just slip into the hole there, and its softness should counterbalance the hard edges of the wood. And planting conifers dead easy. As I say, if you prepare the soil properly, the planting is no trouble whatsoever. Just pop it in a hole and work the soil back round it. And of course, water everything in. But that goes without saying. Doesn't matter what time of year. Now, I just want to show you something over here, because I'm not going to do an awful lot of planting today. Those podocarpus from New Zealand that Joe liked to keep very low, I've popped those in front of that driftwood, and we'll probably prune them just to follow that shape. Now, one little tip. If you are thinking of buying dwarf conifers, remember that they're not designated dwarf just by their size. It's by their inclination and their ultimate height. Here we have a juniper, Juniper conumus. Just keep an eye out for this, because this juniper is a true dwarf. It's not a miniature. And it grows between 1 and 2 inches a year, and this is about 15 years old. But this cypressus, which is very beautiful and got real vibrancy, is probably only 4 to 5 years old, yet they're the same size. This is young, and that is dwarf, and there's a big difference. This will never grow very big, whereas this will probably reach 30 foot or more tall. So use your common sense. If it's a genuine dwarf or miniature, it's going to be expensive if it reaches any size at all, because it will have taken a long time. Now, you may not be into conifers at all, but there's a lot of other things that you can be getting on with this weekend, and here are some ideas. Beetroot are not fully hardy, so if you've got the space, it's a good idea to lift them now and store them. Dig them up carefully, trying not to damage the roots, as they'll store much better with their roots intact. Twist off the leaves, keeping the foliage because it can be good to eat. Take the roots and pack them in damp sand and put them in a cool, dark place.
At this time of year, there's a danger of frost, so you need to move your tender plants under cover. We've got an alpine house, so I'm putting the auriculas and our ioniums in there. But if you don't have one, use a greenhouse, polytunnel, cold frame, or even a sunny porch.
This is a good time of year to move evergreens while the soil still retains some warmth. Lift using a spade, getting a large root ball. Transplant to a suitable part of the garden, and finally make sure you water it in well.
It's all action here.
Yeah, how's the conifer garden looking?
Well, it's not looking bad, you know. It's in its rather curious way. I think it's going to look good.
I'm surprisingly excited about it.
That's good.
I'm putting in a few crocosmias because I've put some in pots for next year, but I've got some left over. Will you put them over there? And then if we drift the colour through to the back here, I think that'll look nice.
Get that drift coming through. Now we'll finish off our planting of the conifers for our Christmas special, which will be broadcast on December the 23rd. And next week we're back at our normal time, and Carol's back here too, and she'll be planting up a native hedge. Joe is going to be adding some colour to our courtyard, and I shall be paying the last visit of this season to the shrubbery. So join us then at our normal time. Bye-bye. It's going to be a cold start to the weekend, with a risk of frost in most areas, particularly from the Midlands north. However, it'll be a bright day, although there is a band of rain spreading down from the north of Scotland. This will be followed by much colder weather, so Sunday morning will start very cold in the north, but wet in the south of Scotland and the north of England. And there's more rain too, spreading in from the southwest, which will reach most of us by the end of Sunday. So make the most of Saturday.